In this review, we'll take a quick look at the Zodiac Killer. And he operated in California in the 1960s. And there's kind of a persona of his activities in a collage there. There's the sketch of him in the middle. And there's the outfit he wore at one of his attacks. There's his writings. There's a bombing schematic he wrote. And, well, it's his symbol right there. And this case is known as the Ace of Cases, and he was never caught. And there's a lot of information on the internet and on television about him. And let me give you some background on the case here real quick. Let's see if I can get something on the screen here real quick. One moment, please. And one moment, please. And
terrorizing a city, taunting police. Sounds familiar? It's happened before.
This is the Zodiac speaking. I like killing people because it is so much fun. His intent was to dominate and terrorize, not just to murder.
Zodiac, an elusive killer from another time. But unlike the DC area sniper, Zodiac looked his victims in the eye, even snipped a souvenir from one victim's shirt.
All the while, this victim is dying. Yes. Cold. Beyond cold.
Tonight, a promising breakthrough in the case. He left an ominous trail of letters and cryptic puzzles, signed with a chilling trademark, a name tied to the occult.
I would then try to recover DNA from the cells that may have been deposited on the letter.
Explosive new DNA evidence uncovered during Primetime's year-long investigation, reported here for the first time.
You're looking at the genetic identity of Zodiac. What does that feel like?
One of the most notorious unsolved crimes ever. John Quinones with irrefutable new proof in the hunt for the Zodiac Killer.
From ABC News, this is Primetime Thursday with Diane Sawyer and Charles Gibson. Tonight, the Zodiac Killer, a primetime investigation.
Good evening and welcome. Charlie Gibson's away tonight. Glad to have John Quinones with us.
Good to be here, Diane, and welcome to another edition of Primetime Thursday.
Well, tonight we bring you a major investigation that at first may sound familiar. A whole region terrified. Random killings. A man who leaves a calling card tied to the occult. But no, this is not the Washington, D.C. area sniper. It's one of the most famous unsolved cases in American crime, and John's here to tell us about it.
Diane, he called himself Zodiac, and he left behind a trail of bodies and taunting letters. Then, suddenly, the murder stopped, and he went silent. For the past year, Primetime has been digging for clues. The case has been reopened. Cutting-edge science is being used to find the true identity of the killer. And now there's critical new evidence, which we'll tell you about tonight. But first, we take you back to the beginning of Zodiac's reign of terror. Zodiac, a symbol that now stands for terror.
He has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again. Psychopath who kills for the thrill of publicity.
The first killings and the enduring mystery begin not far from San Francisco. It is late one night, 5 days before Christmas, 1968. Nothing appears to stand between Apollo 8 and the moon. 2 young lovers, David Faraday and Mary Lou Jensen, are parked beside a country road near the town of Vallejo when headlights appear out of the darkness. The car stops behind them. A man gets out and fires a .22 caliber weapon.
Bullet entered where the sign is here and crashed through into the inside of the car.
The shooter circles the car, blows out a rear tire, then confronts the terrified teenage lovers.
The 2 victims were ordered out of the car and shot out of the car.
A double murder on Lover's Lane. Shocking, especially for a peaceful town like Vallejo. Frightening because it's such a random act. And frustrating because the hunt for the killer turns up nothing. And then, just 6 months later, it happens again. 2 miles from here, at another Lover's Lane. It's after midnight, July 5th, 1969. 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Mike Mageau believe the man approaching their car is a policeman until he opens fire. Darlene dies at the wheel of her car. Mike barely survives. No one knows this is the start of a random killing spree until the killer begins writing a terrifying series of letters to newspapers. He calls himself Zodiac. His signature, a symbol of crosshairs in a gun sight. This is...
And that's a quick look at an introduction to the case. Let me just get this back on the screen here. One moment, please. And let me advance this a bit. Let's see. During the first attack, which took place in 1968, which was just profiled a moment ago, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen in December of that year, they were on a super isolated road connecting two communities. And back then there were fewer cars on the road. That particular road had 1 car per hour. And that's a picture of the road. You see it's quite isolated, no streetlights or anything. And he boxed them in, and they were forced out of the vehicle. And both were shot dead. And here's a crime scene picture. Let me get on the screen here. And here's the vehicle they were driving. As you can see, it's he shot out a window, and he also shot out a tire. And they had tried to escape through the passenger side right here, and he came around and shot both of them dead. And the next attack, which was also profiled, let's see if I can get a picture of that one. That involved Darlene Farron and Mike Mageau, and that took place on July 4th, 1969, just a few months later. And after that shooting, the Zodiac actually called authorities. So you get a picture of it on here. One moment, please. And let's see if I get it on here. One moment, please. And in this particular attack, Mike Mageau survived. Darlene Farron did not. And here's kind of a picture of and that's them parked. And she was 22, Mike Mageau was 19, and the Zodiac stopped him several times. Actually, when he arrived at the scene, he parked behind him and then left, then came back. Then he approached them with a flashlight, as you can see in that picture. They thought it was a police officer. They went to get their wallets, and he shot both of them, and Darlene died. Mike survived, and then after he shot them initially, he walked away and saw there was movement in the car, and he actually returned and continued firing. And then from there, he phoned authorities, taking credit for this shooting as well as the one a few months before of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. And let me get some other stuff on the screen here. Now, the Zodiac started killing officially in 1968, but most people think he started earlier, as well as early as 1962 or 1963. Okay, 2 youths went to the beach in 1963, and they were tragically gunned down, and that case has pretty much been connected to the Zodiac. It's not a case that's all that well known. It involves Robert Domingo and Linda Edwards. Now, for the next attack, the Zodiac went to Lake Berryessa. Okay, and 2 youths went to an isolated lake, kind of like in this picture here. And, oops, let me get on the screen there. When they went to the lake, they parked their car and walked a few hundred yards down to the lake, and the Zodiac kind of ambushed them with an executioner's mask and tied both of them up and stabbed them, and they were able to get help, and Cecilia Shepard died the following day, and Brian Hartnell survived, was able to offer a first-hand account. And he became kind of popular with the media as he did several interviews. He since doesn't do too many interviews nowadays. And that took place just a few months after the attack on Darlene Farron and Mike Mageau. And afterwards, the Zodiac actually, let me get a screen there. He went up to their car and he wrote details about his attacks. And let me get this on the screen here real quick. And there it is on the screen there. Here's his symbol, Vallejo, and the dates of the attacks. And let's see, what else? For his next attack, let me get he ventured into the city. Okay. Yeah, that's on the screen. Okay, one moment, please. He ventured into the city of San Francisco, and he hailed a taxi from a hotel, went to a prominent neighborhood, and it looked like someone was walking their dog, and the area the street is supposed to be let off at, he told the taxi driver to advance a bit, and then he disposed the taxi driver. And he took his car keys, his wallet, and part of his shirt, and he sent part of his shirt to a newspaper a few days later, taking credit for the attack. Now, in this instance, he was seen by some youths in a home across the street. Let me get the home on the screen here. One moment, please. 3 teens were having a party in this house here. Okay. They saw what was happening and called authorities. Authorities zipped to the scene. They were there within 3 minutes. Unfortunately, the description of the Zodiac was false, and the police authorities actually conversed with the Zodiac, and he misdirected them, and then he disappeared into a park. From that point on, they were able to have a sketch of the Zodiac killer. And let me get that on the screen here real quick. One moment, please. And there's the sketch of the Zodiac. And it was seen from the perspective of the kids and as well as of the police officer. And here's the taxi that the Zodiac. Here's the taxi in which the driver was shot dead, and they think he got his fingerprints at from the taxi, but they're not completely sure. The last thing the Zodiac did was seen wiping down the taxi to eliminate any fingerprints. And here's an article about the case. And in 1966, there was a slaying outside a library involving a young lady, and took place in Riverside, California. Whether or not the Zodiac is connected to that case remains unclear. Okay, some people say he was, some people said he wasn't involved. She went to the library, and she had a VW car like this one here, and was studying at the library. And when she left the library, her car apparently had been disabled. Okay, after being disabled, she apparently was killed about an hour and a half later, and the following morning she was found between 2 abandoned homes right near the library. And they think the Zodiac, some people say the Zodiac was responsible, other people say he wasn't. The Riverside Police Department is adamant that he was not involved. And let me get some articles on here. And let's see. Here's an article about the case. It says, Cops No Closer on Zodiac Identity. It looks like that was written by Paul Avery. And here's an article about the Riverside slaying. This came out in the Los Angeles Times. Zodiac linked to Riverside slaying. And let's find another one. Oh yeah, here's one. This is Los Angeles Times again. Zodiac kills number 5. And the Zodiac sent over 20 letters to newspapers, and he sent ciphers. There were 4 ciphers total, 2 which never been deciphered, one of which was deciphered a few days later by the high school teacher, and the other one was deciphered recently, none of which led to his identity. Here's an example of the ciphers he sent. Okay, and trying to get everything in here. After the shooting at the taxi driver, he said he was going to attack school buses, but he never did. He sent diagrams about the bombs he was going to use, and they think he had a Navy background, and 2,500 people have been looked into as being the Zodiac. No one's ever been arrested. It's quite a case. Like I said earlier, it's known as the Ace of Cases. And there's the shoe that he wore during the attack at Lake Berryessa. It's a Navy or Air Force wing walker. They're popular. They're used in the military, and which implies he may have a military connection. And let's see if I can get some. and has stated previously, there we go, there's a picture of San Francisco, and he held the whole city of San Francisco hostage. Nobody knew when he was going to strike again, and people were loath to leave their house at night. At night, streets were empty. Excuse me. And let me get here's another good, quick review of the case from YouTube. One moment, please. So I can get it on the screen here real quick.
We went to the police files, we interviewed witnesses, and analyzed the crime scenes. Our investigation was conducted with an open-minded attitude, an attitude that may have been lacking in the official investigations. Here with the beginning of our results is correspondent Alexander Johnson.
Geraldo, this is the setting, the post-war boomtown of Vallejo just north of San Francisco. It was 1968, and young people growing up in this tough blue-collar town could hear the acid rock beat of Haight-Ashbury just 20 miles across the bay. And it was hard to resist LSD and other mind-altering drugs and the mysterious attraction of the occult, which was spreading worldwide from the epicenter. It was here, just 5 days before Christmas, that the Zodiac struck and killed. Its first victims in Vallejo were a teenage couple, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, shot dead in a dark and desolate Lover's Lane. Retired Vallejo Times reporter Dave Peterson.
About all that was left the next day was blood on the ground, and there was a lot of that. Investigators told me that it was the bloodiest scene that they had come across.
7 months passed. Then around midnight on July 4th, the killer struck again in a deserted golf course parking lot, less than 2 miles away from the Jensen Faraday murder site. Once again, the target was a young couple, Mike Peugeot, who would survive, and Darlene Farron, Dee to her friends. Former Vallejo police officer Richard Hopkins.
And that's a quick review of the case, some of the documentaries that are available on YouTube. And let me get a final screen on here. And there's a final screen there. And they're trying to use modern technology to backdate, to review his old communications with newspapers and trying to get DNA and stuff like that. To date, he's never been caught. And it's quite a case. If you're interested in the case, just go to Google search engine and type up the Zodiac. And there's documentaries on television as well. And let's see. Hopefully I got everything in here. If you heard about the case before, hopefully I offered a good flashback. If not, hopefully I was able to get everything in here in a timely capacity. And it's quite a case. As I stated earlier, it's known as the ace of cases. It's the ultimate unsolved case. And let me get a final screen on here, and that'll do it.